Hello, everyone. Welcome back to an apologetics video on Sunday night. Today, we're going to be talking about the resurrection of Jesus and what claims have been put out there about how maybe he didn't resurrect and maybe we don't understand something like that. We're going to talk about it. Um, the first, I want to just say most of these are historically accurate, or all of these are historically accurate, but most of my claims here are coming from scripture. Um, and if you have a problem with that, you can email me, get in contact with me, because this is the church's page, so I feel like people watching this would believe scripture. But if you don't, that's fine, absolutely okay. Just make sure to contact me if you have any questions or anything like that. If you want to get away from the scriptural side and look more toward the historical side, which I've done this sort of in this. And so I think the scriptures, I think the history will back up the scriptures. So I'm basing the scriptures as truth in this video, just to preface. So the disciples, after Jesus resurrected from the dead, he appeared to the disciples in Acts. The disciples were beaten and were died for their faith. Why would they do this? Some people say it was for money. Some people say it's for their own fame and personal benefit. And I would argue that they didn't. The people who say that don't understand first century Christianity very well at all. The disciples of the church, for that matter, shared everything they had. The church shared everything. The first century church was um, very loving and generous towards each other. They would give the shirt off their backs for each other. And so all the money that they had and earned all went to missions and stuff like that. They didn't have much money. In fact, when they went somewhere, they would stay with people because they couldn't buy places to stay. So it's interesting that people say that is because the reason they probably say that is because the Catholic Church and around the Dark Ages controlled everything. And if that's right or wrong, you decide. But since they controlled everything, they controlled all the wealth. And that's how the church, this notion of the church getting rich off of their faith, that's where that comes from. It certainly doesn't come from the disciples. So another theory is that they all lied about it, about the resurrection. So people say that the disciples could have taken the body out of the tomb and pulled the biggest prank of human history. But it doesn't explain the fact of the matter. So think about the disciples and their structure in general. They were fishermen. Um, so how could they make their way around these big, buff Roman guards that if I mean, obviously the tomb is, huge, but the stone was weighing so much, and these spineless fishermen, how could they just move a stone like that? It would dismiss that. Um, the disciples were already in fear. Their Messiah was dead. The person they've been following for 3 years and claiming that he's the Son of God is dead. So they certainly weren't out that night. So again, the stone was too heavy. They went into hiding. And there's no way that the guards would just let the body be taken. Because in that day, if the body was taken, they would be killed. Which is interesting because people sort of just say stuff and don't know the history of stuff. So people don't willingly, the disciples wouldn't willingly die for something they know is a lie because they suffered greatly for their faith. People say that the disciples were hallucinating. They're obviously distressed at the time. Like I previously mentioned, the person they've been following for 3 years is dead, not breathing anymore, laying in a tomb, dead, cold, dead. And so people were like, well, there's under a lot of stress. They may be hallucinating. Well, first of all, they failed to address the empty tomb, and 500 people claimed to see him after his resurrection. That's a historical fact. Um, so you could say, look, Jesus is dead because dead people don't rise. Like how many people have you seen in your life just get out of a grave and start walking? It would take a miracle, obviously, and miracles aren't scientifically possible. Uh, I would like to say, well, that's right. Uh, I don't see anyone, walking around. Science has not disproven miracles. In fact, it's impossible for science to uh, disprove miracles. No, that's like how science can test everything. Science deals exclusively with natural phenomena, so physical matter, chemical processes, stuff like that. So a miracle, by definition, is not a natural phenomena. It's supernatural. Therefore, science cannot even attempt to explain miracles because it tests in a different subject. Um, so people would all the time, it seems like they combat faith with science and stuff like that, and miracles especially, when science isn't the aim of science is not to do that. It's to address natural phenomena, and again, by definition, a miracle is supernatural. um, so I think the reason people don't like talking about the resurrection and the miracles, and the miracle of resurrection itself, is because if it's true, if it's a fact, then it requires a response. I think it's easy for us to say um, maybe the Easter Bunny or a unicorn, um, and say, well, they're not real. Obviously, we can't see those, um, because we know that's imaginary and there's no really scientific evidence and historical evidence to back all those up. But the possibility of the resurrection being a fact requires a response. So let's take, for example, Paul. We know the story of Paul to Saul, probably, but this man named Saul was walking or riding to Damascus, um, and all of a sudden, uh, it appeared to be Christ coming down and basically blinding him, changing his life, and turned his name into Saul or Paul. Uh, Paul. uh, so, if that's true, um, then a resurrected Jesus was there. In his resurrected state, he was there. Uh, Saul was on his way to persecute Christians, and then Christ appeared himself. The life of Paul changed after Christ showed up. Uh, Christ must have been alive to make such a dramatic change in a zealot, a Jew, like Paul. The Jewish zealots were, in a way, zealous, more aggressive. Some carried daggers. Certainly ruled with a firm stick, if you will. Didn't let anything go by. Very harsh. So when they heard about this Christian stuff, they were very upset and persecuting Christians. And so it took a miracle for a person like that to just see Christ in his divinity, or in his humanity, come down from the heavens and change his life. So I think in the same way that Paul's response was life changing, I think in the topic of resurrection, um, we must also face what Paul did and say, if this is true, and if that is Jesus, and if all this is true, we have to respond in some way. And so the response is up to you. But if Christ resurrected from the grave, um, it makes Scripture, all of this, true. So I think it's something to uh, study and know. And yeah, it's the resurrection of Christ. If you want me to elaborate or any questions, make sure to contact me. And thank you guys for watching.